And speak to former DA leader Mbali Ntuli, who has launched a new project called Groundwork Collective. She joins us now with the very latest in terms of detail and what it will be looking at ahead of next year's election. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time this afternoon. We understand this has been quite some time coming, as you've been doing research with various stakeholders for the past year. What prompted the move? And what do we call the formation? Is it a political formation, or is it a civic formation?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's definitely a civic organization. When I left politics last year, I said that I wasn't interested in joining or starting a political party and that I wanted to go back to communities. And that's what I spent the last year doing. I've been working with communities, doing research, meeting up with partners, finding people in communities that are trying to affect the kind of change that is basically helping our country from coming back from the brink of collapse as it is. And importantly, also meeting with industry experts to come to what we as the Groundwork Collective believe are the most important pillars that we can have, and that's under food production. Because when I was an MP, one of the things that I saw, particularly in the district that I was in, was people that were starving. And we have this euphemism for saying that people are food insecure. But the fact of the matter is that we have children that are so malnourished that by the time they get into school, it's too late for them to be able to access the kind of information and nutrition that they need. The second pillar would be around skills development and entrepreneurship. The median age in South Africa is 27. Young people have no jobs. And then the last one is around civic education. And for me, obviously, this is where my skill set is best suited. But more importantly, if as South Africans we want to see a change in the kind of political atmosphere we have now, it's not enough for people to just vote every 5 years. We need to be fortifying them with the information and the education of how to use their legislation and use their rights beyond what voting is, if they want to hold political parties and players accountable. So for me, I could have gone into politics, but I felt like my skills would be best utilized by actually taking the privilege, the resources, the connections that I've built up over the last 2 decades and giving it back to community people that are trying to upscale the work that they're doing, as well as making sure that, particularly in a civic education, I'm making sure that the next cohort of young people who are coming up, who are going to be voters, know exactly what's at stake and how they can get what they need out of the system, and so that they're not turned away. And that's what I think we've been missing very much in our politics. We have lots of voter education. We know how to put an X to the box. We know when the election might be. What we don't have is civics. How does the political structure work? How do you hold people to account? How can you access things like standing committees like the PPP? How can you create UIPs? There's so much that is out there for people, and we're never going to know it because we don't have this as part of either our curriculum, and certainly political parties aren't going to be doing a lot of work to get people to know it. So this is where I've wanted to fill the gap.
Okay, let's focus on the 3 pillars and start with food production. You made an example earlier on today about the benefits of subsistence farming, at least from what you saw growing up. And so when you speak and do the research to the various stakeholders and people on the ground, as you mentioned, what is it that they are telling you about access to land?
Even if you don't have a large tract of land, there's ways in which farming has become so advanced you can do it. So one of the things that we've done where we've seen that people might not have land is you can teach people how to farm even in a tire. And there's lots of donations of tires that we've been able to get. And so it's not always about land, because if people are going to wait for land and wait for legislation around land to change in this country, they're going to continue to starve. So we've really tried to show that we can show people how to take from a basic seed packet of almost $200 which we get donated, they can have food for 3,000 rand, feed their families, feed themselves, and not have to make the choice about whether they actually are having food or choosing to go out and seek jobs. We want to take the food problem out of that equation. So it's not always about land. We really are trying to find solutions that fit for where people are and not wait for the fact that we would like to have some lofty ideals change in the legislation.
You speak of lofty ideals, and then your second pillar being getting young people into the economy, essentially arguing that the median age in the country is 27, and that is not represented in Parliament. And so what is it that young people told you about barriers to access to the economy?
People don't know where to get startup capital. People don't know how to take their ideas from ideation to an actual startup. People don't know who that they can connect with in their municipalities, in their war rooms, in their committees, or that these conversations are even happening. When councils sit, where do you access your councillor? And so it's become a barrier that people who might have the ideas, particularly young people, or might want to have skills, don't even know where to go for that. And that's what we're trying to make sure that they have. But more importantly, we've also recruited hundreds of patrons in the arts, academia, business, and activism spaces to come on board as mentors who have said that they will give their time and have already started giving their time to young people, so that South Africans who are patriotic don't always have to feel that they have to give money in order to help communities. They can give time, they can give their expertise, and that's what we've been doing a lot of, is linking young people with people that already have the access in different industries to at least give them experience, if not at all times a job. Because that's what we're trying to do, is to keep people connected with other people and to make sure that those young people don't get lost into the ether of hopelessness of not being able to not just find a job, but have anyone care about trying to upskill them in some kind of way.
You speak of South Africans who are patriotic taking part, and then the third pillar being civic participation in democratic processes. How would you characterize the national agenda of South Africa? Because you're also seeing voter apathy. You've also got young people who will be voting for the first time next year, a big chunk of those young people. And so when you go speak to them, what is the national agenda of the country? What do they rally behind?
I think young people want to know that they can have their voices heard, and more importantly, they want to know how they can access opportunity. The apathy is not because they don't care. The apathy is because they don't know where to connect with the political players that actually make the decisions. And so what you get is a sense of them having no political efficacy, which is understanding that their individual contribution, whether it's a vote or their voices being heard, actually makes a difference in any way to the current circumstances that they find themselves in. And so if you want to address that idea, by doing civic education, you then solve the other problems, which is the voter turnout and the voter registration. And so we're going to be doing all three of those, but we understand that even if you get people to register, you won't get them to turn out unless they feel that they have been sufficiently informed about how to hold political parties to account after the electoral outcomes, and that it actually is going to make a difference. And so we've got board games, we've got interesting videos, we're going to be going around to different communities, and we're going to be unveiling a lot of how we're going to be doing this next week when we show our very first public facing project on this particular pillar of civic education. Because no one can really afford to say that they are not interested in politics anymore. And with young people, we think that we've done something that is going to be very tailored and exciting for them to want to opt back in. And more importantly, it's not just about them, it's also about us strengthening our democracy, because the longer you have young people who don't vote, the longer you give them the habit of not becoming people who vote. And as they age from each cohort of age group, it just means that your strengthening of your democracy becomes incredibly weak in a country. So we want to really galvanize people and kill that before it becomes the norm in our country. And also we know from just history and from seeing in other countries like Zambia, like Georgia, with what happened with Newzroom and the Georgia project, when you can flood the voter roll, you make political parties have to actually wake up and think, who are these incredible amounts of people? Why don't we know about them? And forces them to start taking accountability and working towards what people need. And importantly, you also create a cohort of people that have no historical political allegiance to any party, so that if you have people that want to put their hands up and start new parties, start new formations, even if it's a single issue, at least you've given them the ability to have a grouping of people that they can vote for. Because in South Africa, people always say, why don't the new political parties do well? Why do they mushroom and then go away? It's because there's nobody to vote for them, because the current voters roll is very full of people that have put in there by political parties who know that they'll take Mbali, take her to go register, tick her off, and know that on voters' day they can get Mbali to come out to vote for them. And so if you only have that, you're going to keep replicating what we're seeing. And if you want to change that, you have to flood the voters' roll with new people who are going to try and shake the system up by making those political parties more nimble and accountable to them, but also give new political parties the ability to have a new cohort of people. And I'm of the opinion that we'd rather have new political parties entering, even if instead of 5% or 3%, so that they can punch above their weights in Parliament and try to make sure that we're actually diluting this very heavy majoritarianism we've seen for the last 29 years.
Mbali, my executive producer noticed that you don't use the words I when you speak of Groundwork Collective, but you consistently say we. And so the question being, who are you working with, your funders, your backers, etc.?
I'm working with a lot of different organizations. The IEC are one of the organizations that we're working with to ensure the credibility of the kind of work that we're going to be doing, and they'll be at all of our projects, activations that we're going to be launching next week. We've been working with Citizens ZA, which is led by Bobby Godsell, A.D. Eindhoven, Rick Manel, Chief Njingila, Teresa Tluana, who are very well known and prominent businessmen in South Africa, as well as philanthropists. There's many people we're working with, Mazibu and Dr. Stimbi Dembete from Future Elect, particularly on the side of the Civics toolkits. We've gotten lots of different funding, and we've sent lots of proposals to many different organizations, probably too many to say now. But even myself, with the team that I have, I'm working with people who I asked to come on board, and many of them have done so. People like Sazini Mujapelo, who used to be head at ABSA as part of their social impact work and is now a non-executive director. People like Sipisihle Dube, who have a long history of being a part of political communications and strategy in the country. And so what I've done is amalgamated a whole grouping of people from different aspects of the country, using the fact that I've been in politics for so long to come and help on this kind of project. And so collective is definitely how I view it. It's definitely not an I project, and I'm hoping that that's what we can replicate across the country.
Groundwork Collective founder Mbali Ntuli, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.